Hello, today is the 26th of October 2025. I'm going to give you first the reason for this video. I was talking to my brother on the telephone and I said to him, I'm going to do a video on temperance. It's the Cardinal Virtues. And I'm going to start with temperance. And he said, you're going to do a video on the Cardinal Virtues? And I said, yes. And I said, why? I said, well, I don't know. It just, sometimes I read something and the word temperance came out, and I don't know, I'm getting old, I think, and I remember, I went back to my childhood and I remember, yeah, temperance, how I learned about temperance. I remember the river and all that. Okay, and I said, you do remember the Cardinal Virtues, don't you? And he said, oh, yes. And I said, what are they? He said, faith, hope, and no, those are not the Cardinal Virtues. Those are the teleological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. He said, oh, yeah. And I said, what are the Cardinal Virtues? He said, I said, okay, come on. Justice, he said. I said, yes. What else? Prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. And he said, oh, yes, I remember. And he told me a story that he remembered specifically how when he was little and mom was trying to get him out of bed and he wouldn't get up, and then all of a sudden he said, for no reason at all, I just leapt out of the bed, and started reciting the Cardinal Virtues. I leapt out and said, prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. He said, I don't know why, but that is, and he remembered that. And I said, well, I'm going to do one and on temperance, and the fact that you didn't remember them. He said, well, what do you expect? I mean, you call me on the telephone and you ask me what the Cardinal Virtues are. Okay, so that is I said, no, I'm going to do it. So first of all, the teleological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, I learned that I knew this. Okay, I was taught this. This video is going to be in 3 parts. One, what they taught me, what the nuns taught me when I was 8. I don't want to say 7 in preparation for the First Communion because I'm not sure of that. But certainly by 8, I knew this. Then the second part is a little bit later. I don't know when, it was gradual, but certainly by the age of 11, I understood it in a deeper sense. I'm going to go through that. And then, of course, as a young lady at university, I read philosophy, and then, of course, you see that those are also natural virtues, and you read Aristotle and you read about the meaning and so on. So 3 stages in my learning, as it were. So the teleological virtues, vertical because they refer directly to our relationship with God, and I don't know whether vertical or horizontal is the right way, but that is how I imagine it at the time. And the Cardinal Virtues, horizontal in that they teach us how to conduct our life, our relationships with other fellow human beings and so on. So although eventually they have to lead to our relationship with God, it's more how to relate to one another. Okay, so in the case of temperance, how it was explained to me at the age of 8 was, think of a river, okay? Now there is a river, the water is flowing. Now if you want to control that river for whatever reason, there are 2 ways. One, a dam that stops the flow, and the other, the embankments that you build in order to direct the flow of the water. Not the banks are the natural sources, of the river, the natural way, but the embankments is something that you yourself build in order to control the flow of the water in the direction that you want to go. So the dam blocks the water, the embankments direct it. That is actually temperance, and I'm going to talk about continence in a second. I almost used the word. Okay, so the dam is continence. Okay, you block it. Temperance is more the embankment where you direct the flow of the water. Sometimes we have to obviously use continence and stop the flow, but perhaps the more lasting way is the embankment, because with the dam sometimes it can malfunction and sometimes it can break, and when that happens then the river flows all over the place. It's a disaster and it's a catastrophe and you cannot control it and so on. Whereas the embankments guiding the flow of the water is a more permanent way. So all this in relation to our instincts, to our appetites, to our desires, and so on. Continence blocks the passions, temperance guides them. Okay, so more effective, the embankments. The passions by themselves are not bad. Our instincts are not bad. We have an instinct for survival, but the passions are not our enemies. But we have to discipline, get into a good habit of life in order to enable us to control the flow of the river. Okay, so that was by the age of 8. I understood what they meant. A little bit later, with the Catechism and everything, temperance is a moral virtue that balances our attractions to pleasures, and therefore making sure that we have dominion over our will and our instincts, and so keeping our desires within the limits of honesty. Excuse me. In other words, a healthy discretion, one that does not allow our instincts and our passions to go about willy-nilly all over the place, not just because you want something. So temperance is moderation, not prohibition. So it moderates the appetites. We have natural attractions, we have appetites that sometimes are connected with our survival, but sometimes they can be used in excess. So then when they're used to excess, we have not just the eating of food, but we have gluttony and we have lust and we have usury and so on. The example I remember here was one of a bicycle. A bicycle. None of us wants a bicycle without brakes. The function of a bicycle fundamentally is transport, is to take us from here to there. Of course, we can use it for, the pleasure of cycling, but its fundamental function is transport, is to take us from here to there. Now, what the brakes do is to stop the motion, to prevent motion. Yeah, so the brakes are a way of saying to the bicycle or to the motion, no. If we never say no, then we are living our lives without brakes. And what could happen is that if you have a bicycle without brakes, at the first curve, you're going to go against the wall. All right. All right, so a little bit later still, temperance, a moral virtue, but also, like all cardinal virtues, a natural virtue. The ancients understood this. Aristotle talked of the mean, by the mean obviously not an average and not an arithmetical or mathematical result, but a discrete middle way. Okay. I learned later, thinking about it and so on, the roots of the word temperance. First, the Latin root. Temperance has the same root as tempo, time, or temperature, or temperament. It is really in tempo, time, and temperature is obviously a measure. Temperament, more a way, a form of being. Example, in the old times, the tempering of the wine actually meant the mixing of the wine with water. Tempered wine meant mixing the water with the wine. More, adding the right amount of water to the wine. You see, in earlier times, wine was not made as we make it today. It was certainly not poured as we pour it today out of a bottle already made there. What you had with the wine was the densest, the most dense part, the must, okay, which was kept by itself. And then as you pour it, you mixed it with the water. To serve it, it was necessary that you knew how to pour the wine and the water. So pouring wine, you had to know, you have to have the ability to measure the right amount of water. So here the measuring is important. To measure the right amount of water with the must, okay? Because obviously the must could not be drunk directly. To take this even further, in the Catholic Mass, in the Eucharist, before the consecration and so on, we know that the priest goes and mixes the wine with a few drops of water. Yeah. For some, this means, I've heard it because out of the side of Christ, blood and water came out. But go further and a little bit deeper here, if I can use that word. The water means our humanity. The wine signifies his blood, his humanity, human and divine, sorry. Okay, the blood of Christ. Note, therefore, that in the old Mass, which is the one that I attended, I experienced, I don't know whether the priests will keep to this strict rule, but you had to take care that it was only a few drops of water, not just to pour water like this, no. Obviously, it's always in less quantity, but it's important to know that it was only a few drops of water, because the water signifies our humanity, okay? Our human nature. And our human nature, poor, insipid, like water, and mixing that to the wine, the taste of the divine. And note too that it is not the wine that is going to take the nature and the characteristics of the water, but rather the water that is going to take and partake in the nature of the wine. Going back to temperance, I say now we know not only a natural, but a moral law. So temperance, tempering, tempered. Another example, take steel or take a pencil, for example. A pencil made of wood and then the graphite, yeah? Think of the sharpening of the pencil. As you are sharpening the pencil, you're doing away, getting rid of some of that wood, okay, that you don't want to sharpen it so much that you also break the graphite in the middle of it. Yeah, the wood has to be tempered, sharpened moderately, the right amount. So here we have measure 2. If you sharpen too much, you're going to do away with the graphite too, and that's no good, because then you can't write and you have to go on sharpening until you end up, if you do that too many times, you will end up with no pencil at all. Or sharpening the blade of a knife, enough of the iron to take the right amount. But now the question arises, how much, what is in excess of its right use? Take an knapsack, for example, okay, when you're going trekking, okay, too heavy, no good. So you take things out, you are tempering, you are sharpening, you're getting rid of that excess. You avoid the excess. That is what temperance is. And so we have that temperance is here linked to abstinence. What is abstinence? I know that many people say, well, for Easter, I'm not going to eat this or whatever it is. Okay, it is not simply denying yourself of something. If I eat too many chocolates and I say, okay, I'll deny myself of chocolates altogether, that is continence. Or I can say, well, I'll deny, there's nothing wrong with just eating one, but I'll deny myself the excess of it. That is temperance. But what is abstinence? Abstinence is something different. To abstain yourself from something that would not necessarily be bad, but something that perhaps would even appear as a good, a secondary good. Let me explain more specific. For example, slander or gossip. You're talking badly about a person who's absent. Gossiping sometimes leads to slander. Slander is the moral term. Libel is the legal term. So you ask yourself, this is practicing abstinence. What are the circumstances in which I always find myself, for example, ending up in gossiping or speaking badly about someone. Well, usually the circumstances are when you engage in chattering, for example, okay, could be, or look at the social media, perhaps too much, we use it too much, perhaps we are binging on it, perhaps we are binging on scrolling down anything, perhaps stopping binging on everything that is offered to me on my telephone will prevent me from falling into anger, hatred, and all kinds of things. You have a feeling that a lot of it might be toxic, and then you might end up where you don't want to be. And you say, well, but that is harmless. It's just that I'm curious. Okay, again, curiosity is not a bad thing. Thanks to curiosity, we discovered America. Okay, curiosity in itself is not a bad thing. That's why abstinence is denying yourself from something that is not necessarily bad. Perhaps it's a good, but it is a secondary good. A good in inverted commas, as it were. Okay, so yes, curiosity is good, but remember also that temptations, the temptations put to us by the devil most of the time start with curiosity. When we cannot stop. That temptation that it's there because that is what you like. That is what you're attracted to. Because he knows your weak point, your Achilles heel. In this case, for example, this useless information, if that is what it is, perhaps avoiding that. If it is useless, and nevertheless we engage in it, it might make us end up where we don't want to be. Perhaps we might end up finding that it is harmful at the end. So abstinence is the ability to say no. It's the ability to put myself in situations at certain times with certain people, to do things in certain ways where avoiding that you risk ending in a bad place. So I don't want to repeat those actions, to put myself in those situations so often. So I'll abstain myself. I will say no. So temperance animates, gives courage to abstinence, to accept limits within yourself. It's a no that you say to yourself. I mentioned the root of the word temperance in the Latin. Remember that Catholicism also has accepted as part of European civilization is also essential Greek thought, Greek Roman culture. So in the Greek, the word temperance, and I this is something that I learned after, but I looked it up just now because I didn't remember the words. But the ancient Greek words for temperance are two. One is sophrosyne, and the other one is enkrateia. This is important because the Church accepted a lot of the teachings from Aristotle too, because of natural virtues, okay? And these two are related, but they have different nuances. Sophrosyne refers to an ideal character, a sort of soundness of mind that leads to moderation and self-control. Enkrateia was the term used by Aristotle, meaning self-control, self-discipline. It's slightly different nuances here, but the Church accepted both in the sense that it is this last word, enkrateia, self-control, self-discipline, used by Aristotle, power over oneself, self-control, the ability to govern oneself. But as I said, the Church incorporated both, so self-control by all means, of course, stopping something, negation, but also in the affirmative, the possession of oneself, the mastering of oneself, the good management of oneself. I can only master myself when I am able to say no to myself, to take a noble stance that guides my life. And temperance, this ability, is, the Church teaches, a gift from God that man has within himself. Hence, Aristotle, pagan, had the same understanding. Yeah, but remember, there is a natural virtue. There is an inclination of man to govern himself well, and many people are in fact temperate, if only by experience. Now, because I know I'm talking, since I'm speaking in English, and this obviously will be heard mostly by English-speaking people, and I am aware that it is generally a Protestant culture, more the dominance of Protestantism. I thought, well, I probably have to point to a verse in the Bible to make it okay. So I don't know where the verses in the Bible are. Okay, I just know that they are there. They have to be there, directly, indirectly implied. The teaching of the Church is there, or the tradition of the Church, of what the apostles taught, even before the Gospels were written. But they have to be there somewhere. But I didn't know where, so I went where in the New Testament is a specific verse about temperance. Oh, I found it. Okay, so it's 1 Corinthians 9:24-25, which I shall read to you, if I can read this small. I have to put myself here. Okay. Just a second, because I have to read it. Okay, this is the difficulties. It's a very tiny. So, okay. Know you not that they that run in the race all run indeed, but one receiveth the prize. So run that you may obtain. And every one that striveth for the mastery refraineth himself from all things. And they indeed that they may receive a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible one. Okay, that is that what we're talking about here, really, because an athlete denying himself of many things in order to obtain that crown, to obtain that prize, that medal. Take it further. Corruptible, incorruptible. A young girl who naturally wants to look pretty. How much effort, yeah? Your wedding day, it's that one special day. Look at all the efforts, the dress, the hairdresser. Okay, that is for that day, corruptible, temporary. Now put the same effort in that which is to do with the internal life, with the soul, with the eternal, incorruptible. And if we were to put a minimum of that effort that we put on that dress, a minimum of that same effort that we used for our bodies, if we were to put it towards our interior life, we could all be saints. Well, at the very least, we would have a better world. Perhaps the hardest lesson in life is not how to, and I think this is what temperance teaches us, is not how much or how little you might feel, but how to feel rightly. So, to go back to that river when I was 8, not to seize the flow, but to shape its course. Yeah. Okay, so this is it for temperance. Let me know if you want me to do the other 4, which I don't know whether you will or not. Thank you. Bye-bye.